Hi, this is Anne, and I'm sharing a little bit about a contemplation meditation that I have been doing for about 3 years now. It's been very meaningful to me, and while there are other practices that I do, and by no means am I recommending this practice over others, but it's just a share from my heart to yours. Take what you like and leave the rest. Rudolf Steiner, the Austrian clairvoyant and natural scientist and artist, gave this meditation over 100 years ago. And I find that it aligns with the Vajrayana practices, the Kashmir Shaivism practices, the Wim Hof practices, and I find it very curious that a lot of our practices seem to align. So take a little dive with me today, if you like, into this practice and give me some comments. Let me know what you think of it. In the early morning, immediately after waking, before any other impressions have passed through the soul, the pupil gives himself up to his meditation. He strives for complete inner stillness, which means that all attention is withdrawn from impressions coming from outside and from all memories of everyday life. He also endeavors to free the soul from all cares and anxieties which are apt to oppress it, particularly at this time. Then the meditation begins. In order to facilitate this inner stillness, the consciousness is first of all directed to a single idea, so that no image whatsoever remains in the soul. The content of the following 7 lines is allowed to live in the soul, to the exclusion of everything else. These 7 lines may be held in the consciousness for 5 minutes. If other images intrude, the pupil keeps returning again to these 7 lines in profound contemplation. In purest outpoured light shimmers the source of the world. In purest ether fire outpours the lofty power that is I. I rest within the spirit of the world. There shall I find myself forever in the eternal spirit of the world. There are a number of different translations. I find this to be perhaps the least sectarian, so I chose it today. And Rudolf Steiner continues, I'm quoting him, "After this has been practiced for 5 minutes, or as long as feels right, the pupil goes on to the following. He takes a calm, strong breath. After the in-breathing, he breathes out, just as calmly and strongly, so that there is no pause between the in-breathing and the out-breathing. Then he abstains from breathing for a brief period, endeavoring, however, to let the breath remain wholly outside the body. The following are the approximate periods to be observed. The time taken by the in-breathing is optional, to be adjusted in accordance with one's capacities. The out-breathing should take twice as long as the in-breathing, and the abstention from breathing 3 times as long as the in-breathing. If, for example, 2 seconds are needed for in-breathing, then 4 seconds are taken for the out-breathing, and 6 seconds for the abstention from breathing. This in-breathing, out-breathing, abstention from breathing is repeated 4 times. During the in-breathing and the out-breathing, the mind is emptied of thought, and the whole consciousness directed to the breathing. But during the first abstention from breathing, the pupil concentrates on the point lying between and a little behind the eyebrows, at the root of the nose, inside the forepart of the brain, while he fills his consciousness exclusively with the words, I am. During the second abstention from breathing, he concentrates on a point inside the larynx, while he fills his consciousness exclusively with the image, it thinks. During the third abstention from breathing, he concentrates on the two arms and hands. The hands are either held folded or the right is laid over the left. I like to put mine on my thighs. Oops, lost my place. At the same time, he fills his consciousness exclusively with the image, she feels. During the fourth abstention from breathing, he concentrates on the whole surface of the body. That is, he pictures his bodily self with the utmost possible clarity and fills his consciousness with the image, he wills. In another version, the point behind the navel is used rather than the skin. They both work very well, in my experience. He goes on, if these exercises and concentration are continued strenuously for several weeks, something will be felt at those points upon which the consciousness has been focused, at the root of the nose, in the larynx, a stream in the hands and arms, and on the whole outer surface of the body. During concentration upon the arms and hands, the pupil will feel as if a force were driving the hands apart. He lets them go apart, following the line of the force, but he does not suggest this to himself. The feeling must come quite of itself. In it thinks, the it signifies the universal cosmic thinking, which should live as an impersonal power in our words. In she feels, the she signifies the cosmic soul. It means that we should feel, not personally, but impersonally, in the sense that the cosmic soul is impersonal. In he wills, the he signifies God, with whose will we instate our whole being. Or the Shiva Shakti. When the pupil has carried through these 4 breathing exercises, he fills his consciousness for a while with one single image in which he is entirely absorbed, so that during this time nothing else whatever is present in the soul. This image is my power, or I in me, or I will. Then we pass on to complete absorption for 5 minutes, or as long as feels right, in our own divine ideal. This exercise must be enacted with the utmost devotion and reverence. The whole meditation need not last longer than 15 minutes. Sometimes mine is 5 total. In all the periods specified above, we do not go by the clock, but by our feeling. Care is taken to adopt such a position of the body that the body itself cannot, because of fatigue, for instance, be a cause of distraction. For me, I sometimes sit and sometimes lie down on my back with the head in a comfortable but fairly flat position. An explanation of the exercise is given. Whoever strives for esoteric development must above all be clear that certain extremely simple formula conceal a force which takes effect if these formula or sentences are made alive in the soul. He does not rightly grasp what this implies if he tries to understand such sentences merely with the intellect. That way, they say very little to him to begin with. He must for a certain time fill his whole inner being with such a sentence, pouring himself into it with all the powers of his soul. Such a sentence is, I am. The whole secret of present-day human existence really lives in this sentence. Only a being possessed of an external form, similar to that of earthly man today, is able to think, feel, and imbue these words with will. The form of such a being must have developed in such a way that the goal of all the forces working in the body was the frontward shape of the vaulted brow. This vaulted brow and the I am belong together. Earlier in the evolution of the human form, there was a stage when it had not yet pressed forward into such a brow. At that time, the I am could be neither inwardly thought nor described above, nor as described above, could bring itself forth as the I am. This I am was already in existence, only it could not yet express itself in a corporate form, just as it now expresses itself in the bodily form of man. So in an earlier time, it expressed itself in a world of soul. That's the astral world. And it is this very power of the I am, which, having united in the far distant past with a human body, lacking the present brow formation, impelled the forehead to assume its present shape. Hence it is that a man, by sinking deeply into the I am, can feel within himself the force which has molded him into his present form. And this force is higher than the forces which in his ordinary life are active within him today. For it is the creative force of soul which forms the bodily nature out of the soul. Anyone, therefore, who is aiming at esotericism must, for a short period, live entirely in the I am. He must think that this I am, while at the same time he experiences within himself something like, I rejoice that I, as an independent being, can participate in the work of shaping the world. And he must also experience something like, I will my own existence. I resolve to place myself in the whole context of the world. If a man concentrates all this into a single inner act of consciousness, and at the same time shifts the whole force of his consciousness upward into the region of the brow and the inner members of the brain beneath it, then he actually transfers himself into a higher world out of which his brow formation has been brought into being. Let him not think, however, that he can attain these higher worlds tomorrow morning. He must have the patience to undertake this meditation day by day, over and over again, for a long time. If he has this patience, then after some time he will notice a thought arising within him, no longer a mere concept, but a thought teeming with life and force. He will be able to say to himself, the force contained in the seed of a plant, impelling it to form the organs of the plant, must be inwardly alive, just like this thought of mine. And soon this thought will reveal itself to him as if it were radiating light. In this inner radiation of light, he feels happy, full of the joy of existence. A feeling permeates him which can only be described as joyful love in creative existence. And a force imparts itself to the will as if the thought were radiating warmth through the will, energizing the will. All this can be drawn from sinking himself in the right way into the I am. He will gradually realize that the highest intellectual, psychic, and moral power comes to birth in him in this way, and that he thereby brings himself into a more and more conscious relationship to a higher world. A second such sentence is, it thinks. This it thinks represents a way that corresponds to the account given of the I am, the force through which the form of the human speech organs has been developed from the higher worlds. When thinking was still functioning in a higher world of soul, and not yet within a human body, it worked from that higher world in such a way that the organs of speech, not yet existing in the human form, were incorporated into it. If, therefore, the esoteric pupil sends his thinking, feeling, and willing into the depths of the it thinks, at the same time concentrating his consciousness on the region of the larynx, there will arise in him an experience of the creative force of soul, which from the higher worlds manifested in the creation of the organs of speech. If again he has the patience described above, he will experience how, from the it thinks, rays go forth, which are like the opening harmonies of spiritual music. They fill him with a feeling of reverent devotion, and at the same time with a force which tells him what I will as man will gradually increase in wisdom. An inkling will come to him of that force which as divine spiritual force pours itself through the cosmos, ordering all things according to measure, number, and weight. A third sentence is, she feels. In still earlier times, the force of this sentence, too, was not yet present within man, but dwelt in a higher world of soul. Working down from that higher world, it recast the form of the human body. Until then, there had been no difference between hands and feet. They were identically shaped organs of movement. Hence, man had not yet attained his upright posture. It was a great step forward in human evolution when his anterior organs of movement were transformed into organs for manual work. He was then able to assume his upright posture and so to overcome his lower nature, inasmuch as his gaze was now directed out and upwards toward the heavenly worlds of spirit. Thereby, too, he first became capable of fashioning karma. For it is only when a being possesses this particular form that his deeds come within his own individual responsibility. Thus it was that spiritual beings transformed man as the force of the she feels, which had previously reposed in them alone, streamed into the human body. If therefore the esoteric pupil sinks himself into the she feels, again in the way described above, he raises himself to the corresponding creative powers of the higher world. But together with the she feels, he must concentrate the whole of his consciousness on his arms and hands. Out of the thought she feels, an experience of indescribably blissful life will then stream to him. This feeling can be described as that of love in active existence. Thereby he attains consciousness of how the creative love flows through cosmic space, and by its deed pours into all things the breath of life. A fourth sentence is, he wills. It was by the force of this sentence that in a primeval past, the human body as a whole was for the first time separated out as an independent being from its environment. Before this force worked upon it from higher worlds, the human body was not shut off on all sides by an outer skin. Streams of substance flowed into the body from all sides and out of it again. It had no independent life, but was entirely immersed in the life of its environment. In that epoch, of course, the environment was quite different from that of our own time. If the esoteric people now and again sinks all his thinking, feeling, and willing into the he wills, concentrating his consciousness on the whole surface of the outer skin, he transfers himself gradually into the sublime creative forces of the he wills. These are the forces of the supersensible world, whereby the things of the world of sense are given their form and shape. If he has sufficient endurance, the human being will feel in the deeply inward experience of this thought, as if he were raised above all sensible corporeal existence, and were looking down upon the field of sense creation in order to work upon it in conformity with the divine thoughts attained in the spiritual world. The force proceeding from this thought is that of being joyously transported into pure spirituality, and the attainment of a consciousness that out of higher regions one can bring to the world of sense that of which it stands in need. As he engrosses himself deeply in these thoughts that are forces, the esotericist will simultaneously have to focus his attention on his breathing process, and for a short time transform it from an unconscious process into a consciously regulated act. For a while, the forces working from higher worlds upon the human form were achieving the transformation indicated. These same forces produced within this form the present breathing system, the system necessary for a being whose body has an independent existence, the work of whose hands is his own responsibility, whose organs of speech can translate experiences in the life of soul into externally audible sounds. The ascent into the higher regions of world creation is furthered by directing the attention in this way to the breathing process. If the esoteric pupil learns by degrees thus to experience consciously the higher cosmic forces, which are indeed always slumbering within him, but of which he has hitherto been unaware, then what he would already have assimilated through study becomes alive in him, begins to glimmer into perceptible reality. I just lost my place. My iPad reset itself. He should already have acquired the knowledge that man, together with the evolution of the earth as a whole, passed through different stages of transformation before the present earth came into being. These stages of transformation are called the Saturn condition, the Sun condition, the Moon condition. The esotericist has also to acquire the knowledge that in later epochs there is a certain recapitulation of earlier conditions. Thus, the Saturn, Sun, and Moon conditions were recapitulated during the Earth evolution, and in such a way that the Saturn repetition corresponds to the creative work of the he wills on the outer sheath of the human being. The Sun recapitulation corresponds to the creative work of the she feels on the arms and hands, and the Moon recapitulation to the creative work of the it thinks on the organs of speech. The idea of the human body as a mere product of the sense world is abandoned, and the esotericist finds his way to vision of those higher worlds whence come the forces that work creatively on man. So too the bare concepts which have been acquired of such matters as Saturn, Sun, and Moon become actual perceptions and experiences. And so indeed it must be, if the way is to be found more and more from the exoteric to the esoteric. The exercises given here must, of course, be regarded as only a beginning. The pupil must, however, work strenuously through them, and then he will reach the point where he can receive further exercises through which still higher forces that slumber within him are awakened. The aim is to gain an inkling of the spiritual facts which underlie the words I am, it thinks, she feels, he wills, and to feel their connection with the members of the human body whose form has arisen from out of the spiritual worlds. It should be added for information that the above words of power, the three forms, it, she, he, are well founded in the nature of the higher worlds. It is the word of power for the cosmic thinking, that is, for those beings in the higher world to whom creative thinking belongs, in just the same measure as sense perception belongs to the human beings below them. She is the word of power for the cosmic soul, which originates the feeling that streams out from it, whereas human feeling streams in, being stimulated from outside. This feeling of the world soul is the creative cosmic love which brings all things into existence. He is the word of power for the cosmic will, the cosmic spirit whose will acts from out of himself, whereas the human will is brought into action through the outer world. She, he, it, creative archetypal power of the world. Today is the day that Rudolf Steiner crossed the threshold of death. And many wonder what he's doing today. I believe that he is a bodhisattva and that he gave of his life body, his memory body, into the living body of the earth, what some call the etheric sheath of our planet. You don't have to agree with that. Take what you like and leave the rest. But I offer this little window into something that is a very tangible practice in my own life, and invite comments from others who may be involved in Buddhist, Zoroastrian, Vedanta, and other forms of practice to see the commonalities in these practices. Love and light to everyone